And we're live again. Welcome back, everyone, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras. As every week, I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling, man, on this Friday evening?
Hey, doing okay. Just had a busy week and looking forward to kind of relaxing and talking about something interesting.
Definitely, man. Okay, so I think for this episode, we are going back a little bit to our, I don't want to say roots, but like we did a whole bunch of like UFO type episodes back in the day when we first started recording, and for like the last, I don't know, 2 months or so, we have been really focused on like true crime, disappearance type of stories. But today I'm thinking we're gonna definitely skip on that for this weekend. We're looking into a really interesting UFO case / aviation case. I think you have a little bit of a premise for us, and then I think we'll just jump right into it.
Yeah, so I always have like a very strong attraction to this topic. The whole paranormal topic, whether it was ghosts or ESP or things like that, that was always, uh, you know, kind of the point in my life where I moved from, I guess, reading like children's books literally to reading like let's say literature meant for adults or nonfiction meant for adults. So what I mean by that is I actually literally remember being at the library and kind of, going through the little kids section, and you have all these books that are kind of meant for like 7 and 8 year olds, like Encyclopedia Brown and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, there was a book called The Devil's Triangle, and that was, I think it was still in juvenile, but it was like juvenile going on adult. And this was actually one of the things where this is a topic. This is how I got into UFOs. So what it was is my parents let me watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is still an amazing movie, still really holds up. And it was all this interesting stuff about UFOs, and that's a movie, by the way, that Spielberg had done a lot of research into, because this was one of his favorite topics, as you can see by other movies he did. So, anyways, whenever I get into this topic, I always remember a very fond memories of growing up in the '80s, and I think when I stumbled on this topic, you don't really realize that you're stumbling into almost a religion. And by religion, I don't mean that things are not necessarily provable or that you have to have just faith in it. But what I mean is people have very strong emotions about this topic. And I certainly was one of those people that had very strong emotions. Here's one of the interesting things to think about this topic about UFOs or extraterrestrial life, or the big it has to do with the big questions in life, right? Are we alone? Are we the only intelligent beings in the universe that can do what we can do? And I think what's been interesting is how that topic's been approached. Now, I think on another show, it's well worth looking into some of the other UFO things that happened earlier last century, where this isn't actually the first time this topic's been interesting, but the topic's been one that's been kind of back and forth, where it's become of interest to different people, to big groups of people for good reason often, and then sort of like official government sources and other societal forces will make fun of it and kind of diminish it and just quote unquote disprove it and kind of make you feel like a dummy for believing it, and then it kind of goes away for a while and then it comes back again. And I think when I was a kid in the 80s, I was probably coming onto it, probably learning about the topic right when it was starting to become popular again. And what I mean by that was, movies like Spielberg's movies, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the late 70s, and then E.T., which was when I was about 5 years old, which was a massive hit. But even E.T. is sort of trivializing the UFO thing. E.T. isn't really about UFOs. E.T. is kind of about like a cute little alien living with some kid and his fans. It's more like about 80s family life, if anything. So I think what was interesting is as I got older, this is where I found myself learning, like doing more reading. This is where I started actually saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of books in the grown-up part of the library. And this is where I learned to really love like all the many books you could read on pretty much anything in the library, but especially UFOs. And when I started to get more versed in the literature and found out this was just like the tip of the iceberg. Now, what was interesting was right around that time was when you started to see a lot more interest from everyone else. So you had things like the Phoenix Lights, which we did an episode on. You had shows like the X-Files, which were kind of on the fence between like kind of making fun of the UFO thing, but also playing off of um, people's enthusiasm about the topic. You know, the whole "I want to believe" motto from the show. So it's interesting that like after that, and of course Roswell made a big comeback at that period where there started to be a lot of interest in what happened at Roswell, and that's probably another show episode we can dig into because that's a super controversial topic. But I think after that it kind of died away again. X-Files kind of went away, other than the movie. It wasn't as interesting. And then in the past 5 or 6 years, especially with the New York Times story about the Nimitz UFO sightings, that was where you started to see people get really interested again. And I think overall, I'm really happy because the UFO topic has gone from something that's been really fringe and like something that someone would maybe make fun of you about to something that like has some legs under it, to the point that now UFOs, there's actually a new term for them, called unidentified aerial phenomena, because I think the UFO thing almost assumed too much about what's going on, and I think it's more, or sometimes they call it unidentified aerial vehicles. So to imply that like if there is something besides just something visual going on, well, like what is that thing? So you've seen, especially in recent, like even this past year, you've seen the Navy basically admit that they have videos of these things, that it's not just weird people lying or making things up or imagining things, that there really is something going on. So on one hand, I'm super excited about the topic. I'm super excited that, we're at a period where like it's almost like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where the government starts actually admitting that stuff's going on. But on the other hand, I have to be really careful personally, and I know sometimes I've expressed this in the show, that my own enthusiasm doesn't lead me to make false claims or to believe something that maybe the facts aren't on the same side of reality. And the reason why I say that is I think when I was a little kid and I was reading about this, like I was super credible about all of it. I thought ghosts were real. I thought no one would lie and put it in a book. No one would make up things. Who would want this kind of attention? And I still feel like that about some of these things. I mean, certainly the airline pilots, the military pilots that think they saw something, if anything, they lose ground in their career when they do that. They have many disincentives to admit to that, and in fact that's why they often don't go on the record. But at the same time, I think as I've become an adult, and now I'm kind of an older adult, I'm in my 40s, I've also come to understand the psychology behind people that want attention, good or bad, which I didn't really understand when I was a kid. And I think that's where I think on this show it's going to be really interesting when Juras and I talk about this topic, because there's a part of me that really wants this to be what happened in this case, like a real UFO case, and even, that's what happened here. And then there's the other part of me that is a little bit of a skeptic, and as much as I kind of hate some of the skeptical explanations, and I'm going to pick them apart where I can, there's part of me that really wants to make sure that, let's say, one person who wants attention doesn't taint the whole topic by doing something that ends up being proven wrong later. If that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Ross?
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
kind of
I mean, it
out there.
definitely makes sense. I mean, you did like a really good premise for us. I think we have our like bases covered here. Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to add something to that. Is that I think that like some of these UFO encounters might be real legit encounters, and that not everyone is like only like looking for attention and things like that. Now I think we'll definitely get into if today's topic was about someone who wanted attention, or about someone who legitimately encountered something that he did not understand in the sky, whether it was because of his own wrongdoing. Maybe he was ill equipped with knowledge to do certain flights and he didn't know what was happening, or maybe it was an actual strange occurrence that we can't really explain. All of this is gonna be discussed shortly, and I think we should jump right into it, man. So today we're gonna be talking about Frederick Valentich. He was an Australian pilot. I'm gonna jump right to his image. I mean, if you're on our YouTube channel, you could definitely see his picture right now. So he was a 20-year-old freshly baked pilot, you could pretty much say. He had about 1,500 total hours of flying time. He held a class 4 instrument rating. I think you're gonna want to talk a little bit about that, and I will also say that he wasn't authorized to fly at night. Oh no, he was authorized to fly at night, but in visual meteorological conditions. Why is this fact important? Because on his last flight, he was flying at night. He definitely was flying at night. It was like around 7 to 8 p.m. On October. So you know that the sky was pretty dark, and but the weather conditions were excellent. So he was allowed to fly, but it was night. So the last thing I'm going to mention about this guy before we jump into the details, maybe you will want to talk a little bit about the class 4 instrument rating and maybe about the plane that he was piloting. The last things I have here about him is that he had a private pilot license for about 1 year. He was 20 years of age. I don't think it was even humanly possible for him to have that have the license for even longer. He was a really young pilot. He lived with his parents. He was training to become a commercial pilot. He was attending some sort of a volunteer group of pilot learning, like a volunteer group of people that wanted to learn how to fly planes for the RAAF, which is the Royal Australian Air Force. Another interesting fact is that no psychological and mental issues have been reported in his life, because I think this will come up in the show eventually. And yeah, pretty much I think if you want to take it away a little bit in regards to his RAF days, how he got denied that thing, also about I guess his level of preparation, the class 4 instrument rating. I don't really know that rating system at all. And then also a little bit about the plane that he was flying. And I think after that we could pretty much jump into the event.
Yeah, so I mean, so interesting I've gone over aviation topics before on the show. I think when we did Flight 19, for instance, and that's also one of the things that I've always had a high level enthusiasm for. I've never wanted to be a pilot, but I love airplanes, and I happen to live in a city, Los Angeles, and in a location, specifically the Valley, where I actually live next to the busiest general aviation airport in the world, which is Van Nuys. And what I mean by that is it's not the busiest airport in the world. Sure, that's some airport in China or New York or something, but I live next to an airport, I live near an airport that doesn't have commercial flights, but it has, I think pre-COVID, it had something like 1,800 flights a week going in and out of it, because it has several flight schools, it's got charter flights, it's got jets, it's got propellers, etc. So I think I've always been surrounded by that, and particularly the kind of airplanes that we're going to talk about today. One of the things that's important about flying is it's not an easy thing to do. There's a whole bunch of tests you need to do. There's different levels of qualification that you need to be able to do to fly not only certain kinds of airplanes. So you have to qualify for, let's say, a single engine aircraft, and then a multiple engineer craft and flying something that, say, has jet turbines. Jet propulsion is different than flying something with propellers. And there's a lot of different tests you have to do. And one of the trickiest topics is that of like reduced visibility or no visibility flying. And it makes sense, right? I mean, you can't. I don't know if you've ever driven your car into like a really bad fog.
Yeah,
I've been lucky enough here.
I had. Yeah, it's not fun.
It's terrifying, right? I've only really done that once. I had this happen a long time ago. I was up by Lompoc by Vandenberg Air Force Base, and we were on like our first vacation as a couple, me and my wife, when we were just dating, and we ran into a fog. And we couldn't, like, you literally couldn't see 5 feet in front of the car, and we were on the highway, and
Goddamn.
that was terrifying. So imagine doing that in a plane, right? And what's kind of amazing is it's actually, in some ways, if you know what you're doing, it's actually safer in a plane, because like in a car, like you're almost certain to hit something, right? But in a plane, most of the time, ideally, you just have the air in front of you.
Yeah.
So, that I think kind of makes sense, like why you might have to understand how those instruments work. And so anyways, this is a long-winded way of saying that to do no visibility flying, there's a set of instruments that you're essentially tested on, and because there's some kind of known psychological things that happen and physiological things that happen to you in the air, there's a lot to pay attention to. That's the other thing. This is why like commercial airliners have 2 pilots, because there's just an enormous cognitive load on you. So unlike, that's where it is harder than driving. Well, driving, I think all of us that know how to drive, at some point we can kind of drive in our sleep, right? Almost literally, like it's muscle memory, right? But that's not really the case for flying. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. There's just, you're really you're kind of projecting your body into an environment that you're not really ready for. And because of that, there's what's called a cognitive load. Mm-hmm. So like just the amount of thinking you need to do. So that's why, generally flying solo is something you do after you've had a bunch of hours of instruction. Like you don't fly by yourself until you've, spent some amount of time with an instructor, which, our protagonist here had done. Frederick had done. Yeah. So yeah.
How is he allowed to fly alone if he only has like 1,500 hours? Or I'm not 1,500 hours, like 150 hours. Yeah.
So I mean that's actually a decent amount of hours. So yeah, I mean.
Okay.
This is where so that's something important to point out is flight time is tracked in hours, and like you'll see, even though it doesn't sound like a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of like your most experienced, for instance, if you listen to the jet fighter podcast, fighter pilot podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry, the people he talks to who are like, some of them are retired. They've flown like 3,000 hours in their whole career, and they're considered to be highly seasoned veterans. Yeah, so
wow.
150 is actually a decent amount. The only issue is, he had 150 hours, but he'd also failed some tests. He'd failed a series of tests, 5 different tests that he was supposed to do to get past kind of this basic level of licensing. He'd failed them twice. Basically he'd failed like 10 tests or 5 tests twice, right? 5 times 2. So because of that, he had some restrictions on what he could do. So for instance, he wasn't allowed, I don't think, to transport like certain kinds of cargo or passengers. He wasn't allowed to.
I will say that for his
for
his last trip, he did tell like the airport officials that he was going to pick up some friends. So I'm not really certain if he was not allowed.
Maybe I'm wrong on that. Yeah,
maybe.
Maybe we'll have to edit that out.
Or not. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing: is he had some restrictions on when he was able to fly, so he couldn't he couldn't do like no visibility flying. He was allowed to fly at night, but only when things were visible, which wasn't really the case here. And it's not super unusual for pilots to sometimes bend the rules. There's actually a series of different videos on YouTube about airplane accidents where they kind of break down like what happened, and like case in point, what happens is someone gets approved to fly from like point A to point B, and they have kind of like the same license status as maybe Frederick, where he, okay, you're allowed to go here and you're allowed to go there, but you need to be able to see. And what happens is, no surprise, especially when you're talking over big distances, weather changes, right? So all of a sudden that visibility goes down. And what happens is somebody will kind of push it and kind of bend the rules and say, oh, you know what? I think I know what I'm doing. I don't really want to fly 70 miles out of my way and then have to get up and fly again and burn more gas. I think I can make it. And then unfortunately they guessed wrong. So that's not super unusual, tragically, but unlike driving in a car where you're like, oh, I'll just drive to this place instead of there, or it's just a lot. You can't just pull over on the side of the road.
I just want to add one more thing here, is that, that's definitely a good reason to sort of, assume that someone might run into issues if they run out of fuel. But just the interesting fact here is that like he had enough fuel for like another 800 kilometers left. So, that's a pretty crazy thing. Why did he have that much fuel? I mean, we will get into all of this shortly.
So that's also actually maybe that's worth getting into. Like he'd had some issues here. So he tried to enlist in the Royal Australian Air Force, which is known as RAAF.
Yeah.
Was rejected because he had inadequate educational qualifications. So they probably, this is like not during a war, so they're being picky, certainly because the government is going to be picky about who gets to fly their multi-million-dollar aircraft. He was trying to do all the right things. So he was a member of the RAAF Air Training Corps. He really had a high level of enthusiasm for that career path. I guess the question was, did he have the aptitude in addition to the enthusiasm? So, for instance, he was studying part-time to become a commercial pilot. But like I said, he failed all 5 commercial license examination subjects, and had as recently as the previous month had failed 3 more commercial license subjects. And he'd also been here's I think the big red flag for should he have been a pilot, is he'd been involved in flying incidents. Like I said, he's only been doing this for 150 hours.
Wow!
And somehow he's been able to qualify. Yeah,
that's a lot of incidents for like 150 hours. Like all of these incidents.
Yeah.
Come on, that's a lot.
Failing tests. So for instance, he'd strayed into a controlled zone, which that happens. It gets confusing. So the sky really is. Almost has like these designated paths. They have both low level and high level flight paths that are sort of designated that the air traffic controllers will navigate you along. So sort of like invisible roads in the sky you're supposed to mostly follow to. And there's different rules about what zones you can go into. One of the surefire ways to get yourself in trouble is to go into the wrong zone. So whether that's straying over towards Area 51, which is always a no-go zone, even for military pilots, or going into the wrong zone, like when the president is there. So sometimes places temporarily become restricted areas, and some places are always restricted areas, like around an airport. Certainly it gets very touchy because they have aircraft coming and going. So he'd had some issues there, and he twice deliberately flew into a cloud, for which prosecution was being considered, it says here in Wikipedia. So, wow. I mean, like I said, these are big red flags about his behavior versus his abilities and his licensing. And those rules are there for a reason. And this is where I think, I mean, even if something had not happened to him, you would think that the RAAF would be looking at this and saying, listen, are you demonstrating the judgment that we would want to entrust a multi-million-dollar plane paid for with taxpayer dollars, given your attitude towards the equipment that you're responsible for. So, I think that's a good summary, I think, of what's going on in his professional life, that he's, he really loves flying. He's really not very good at it.
Yeah.
And I think on the personal level, I think. Did you want to go into kind of what was going on his personal level? Because I know when you and I first talked about this, I kind of had this mental image that maybe he was a loser. He was like this dorky dude who was really dead set on this one thing and sort of like wasn't very good at it, and that maybe he was a loser. But you really set me straight, I think, when we talked about this, that he seemed to have been doing well in other aspects of his life.
Right. So I think I can like take over a little bit here. I have a few points regarding his personal life that are really interesting. So these are gonna be the last points that we talk about before we jump into the actual disappearance. So I will say that he had a girlfriend named Rhonda Rushton. At the time when he started dating her, he was 19, but he was soon to become 20. And he disappeared at the age of 20. And Rhonda was actually 16, so she was quite a bit younger than him. Rhonda was apparently dating some other dude, but then at some like party or something like that, like Frederick just like sort of ended that whole situation with Rhonda and her then boyfriend, and somehow he like got to be like with her and things like that. I didn't really research into it too much. There's actually quite a bit of information regarding their relationship. Some UFO enthusiasts from like on YouTube have done like interviews with Rhonda back in 2014, where like she really goes into depth about their relationship. I didn't really go through all of it because it really felt like a Casablanca a little bit too much for me, so I didn't want to like spend a lot of time there. I did get the most important points from that interviews. So they were dating for 6 months, and the interesting fact here is that actually Frederick proposed to Rhonda on the same day. Not on the same day, but on the same month when he disappeared. So I'm thinking this is pretty interesting to propose to a 16-year-old girl. I mean, things happen. So allegedly, according to Rhonda, Frederick was very meticulous while preparing for flights, because she did go on many flights with him. So I guess that sort of, I mean, I don't know, maybe Rhonda was like, didn't really understand the full ins and outs about like flight preparation. So if Frederick actually does anything to prepare, like just like checks like the bare basics, to her that probably seems like he's doing like a lot, you know what I'm saying? So maybe I don't really know how well a 16-year-old Rhonda Rushton, who wasn't a pilot, would understand, like, is he preparing real well and things like that. Also, yeah, as I've said, in the same month that Frederick disappeared, he had proposed to Rhonda. But this is the interesting detail here. He told her not to tell her parents or his parents about the proposal until her birthday. I really don't know how to make sense of this. There's really no like angle to play here. She just told. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I just interject. I'm dancing around this a little bit, but I wonder if the age of consent in Australia,
no idea,
was 17, and that maybe he just didn't want to look like a pervert. Let me see. I mean.
Yeah, I'll just keep.
Worried about it. Yeah.
I'll just keep on talking while you grab that information, I guess.
This was South Australia, right?
I think
in
so.
South Australia.
Wait, it's different in South Australia?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it's hilarious, but it's actually the same here in the United States. Is that the age can be very different depending on what.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, I don't know how it is in Australia. But it's super serious here. Like you'll go to jail, but I'm not sure. Anyways, and it could have changed over time.
Yeah.
I see here, out of the 7 Australian states, 2 of them have the age of consent at 17, and the rest are 16.
Okay.
So maybe that's why. Yeah.
Okay, man, that actually makes sense now. He did invite her to his last flight that he took, but Rhonda just for some reason couldn't make it at that particular time. Now, Rhonda was flying with him a lot, so they've been on quite a bit of like flights with together, because Frederick always wanted to get his hours up, I guess. And yeah, so Ron. Also, the last thing I will say here, that Frederick mentioned to Rhonda that he was going to fly over water, and he was worried about that. So that's the only interesting detail here. That I guess Frederick hadn't really flown over water, like for like it was his first occasion of flying over water at night on that particular day when he disappeared. So I guess that's something to mention here. I will say that this is where the really Looney Tunes type of situations start to happen in his family. Well, not then, but like his mother had gained some sort of a local notoriety, some sort of a local fame, because she apparently was kidnapped by aliens. And that was her whole thing. Like, she was pushing the agenda that she really was kidnapped by aliens. And I'm immediately thinking that that probably changes the entire dynamic within the family, because aliens was not taboo at that point. I mean, if your mother is abducted by aliens, you're like, you know what I'm saying, you're probably talking about that on every other day, you know?
Yeah, if you just see one, you're boring, you know. I mean, like, because mom got
Abducted.
kidnapped. Yeah, I mean, I think it also changes the dynamic, maybe, of how we view him or his family, or kind of some of the
Yeah,
dialogue that goes on in them. But yeah, I think so that, once again, like, just from my premise,
yeah.
that's where I start to get a little bit of maybe bias for what goes on
I
in the
will.
story. But yeah,
We'll get to it, yeah. So, like, the last point before we jump into the event is that Frederick had actually observed a UFO moving away very fast earlier that year, and he told his father about the sighting, and he also expressed his concerns regarding what would happen if a UFO ever attacked him. I don't know if he saw that UFO while he was flying, or just like out and about, like not flying. So that's also interesting that, you know, he apparently had also seen a UFO. So he was a really young man who was interested in UFOs. He allegedly had some UFO documents from like his RAAF days, like, because he got like a bunch of documents. Now it's not really certain whether or not he actually got those documents, and it's not even certain if UFO documents exist in the RAAF, or at least back in the 70s, because, you know, surely they would be classified to some degree. So all of this thing regarding his like studies of UFOs, we don't really know about that. So let's get into the disappearance. I think we're like a half hour into this podcast, so I think it's about time we actually talk about the disappearance. I will say, before we jump straight to the disappearance, which happened on October 21st, I will mention that 3 days earlier, on October 18th, Frederick had actually went to the airport that he was going to fly out of in Melbourne, and he was turned down a flight because of bad weather conditions. So, you know, he did want to fly 3 days earlier, this is disappearance, but the conditions were way too bad for that. So he tried 3 days later, on October 21st, and actually he got the green light to fly the Cessna 182L light aircraft over Bass Strait, Australia. Now, at this point, I think I'm gonna jump into the Google Earth, so everyone who's watching this on our YouTube channel could pretty much see the map that I have prepared. So I'm gonna try to spin the map real quick while I talk a little bit about it. So as you can see, we have Moorabbin Airport. So this is the airport where he was supposed to fly out of. Now, his destination, or at least allegedly what he told like the airport officials, was to fly to King's Island, which is this island right here. It's like in between Tasmania and Australia, I guess. It's still Australian territory and things like that. So he told the officials that he was gonna fly out to this island to pick up some friends, like 3 to 4 friends, for like, I don't know, to like bring them back. I don't really know why they sort of didn't double check that story, because there were no friends on this island. But the other interesting point is that he actually told his parents and his girlfriend that he was going to fly out to get some crayfish. So there's like two different agendas here, and we can immediately like say that this is like a huge red flag. You tell the airport officials you're picking up 4 friends, and you tell your family and girlfriend that you're picking up crayfish, which, by the way, neither did the people on the King's Island were waiting for him, nor was it the crayfish season and there were no crayfish. So I'm thinking neither the airport officials nor the family members like try to double check like the story, because it's like completely crazy at this point. Now, as you can see from the map, you can see like this yellow line. I mean, it's supposed to be the line of the assumed route that he took. We don't really know if this is the route that he took, but like it's really highly suggested to take this route for pilots who are flying from Moorabbin Airport to Kings Island Airport, because you would sort of shorten the distance that you fly over sea, because apparently flying over land is a lot more secure than flying over sea, and I can definitely agree. I understand that. So yeah, he was supposed. Yeah, sure.
Jump in real quick too. I mean, the other thing is, remember, this is before GPS. I mean, I don't even think. Yeah, I don't even think military had GPS yet. So, like, navigationally, here's the thing: a pilot like him should know how to use radio navigation beacons, which they're a little bit tricky. I mean, it is part of his training was to learn how to do that and tune those in. But once again, you're talking about something that, I mean, if you ever play like Microsoft Flight Simulator or something like that, and before GPS became like a thing that everybody had, I actually was using that program before before most of us had GPS, and like the radio navigation beacon thing is like it's a lot to think about and a lot to fiddle with. It's easy to get it wrong. So imagine like how much easier it is to not get lost by just following the coast, on this map here. And then it is South Australia, by the way. And then I do wonder too, because he wanted to be a commercial pilot, so he wasn't a commercial pilot, which means he couldn't charge people as passengers. He couldn't charge for cargo. I was researching this, and yeah, it turns out like there's even like kind of weird restrictions depending on how many hours you have on whether you can even take any passengers. So I'm not even entirely sure. Yeah, I'm not even though like he told them he was going to go pick up passengers. To your point, like it doesn't seem like they did a lot of research, but it may well be with 150 hours he had enough to at least pick up friends and do it. Like there's plenty of YouTubers. I was trying to dig into the class 4 thing, but like I don't know if it's just the rules have changed, which they have made new classes of pilots and stuff, but I couldn't really find anything for class 4 like for exact rules there. But it may be that he had enough hours to maybe go and pick up people. But yeah, to your point, it is a little weird that like the crayfish weren't even seasonal yet, and I don't know, like just at this point in the story, as much as I would want to like believe, I mean, he's coming from a family of liars, it kind of sounds like. I mean
allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. A little bit, yeah. I mean, his mom's a little wacky.
Allegedly,
and then he's like super enthusiastic about. Yeah. Allegedly a little wacky, and then he's like he is as into this UFO topic as I was when I was 9, like just obsessed with it. You know what I mean? And it's like I don't know. I get and then that thing he said to his dad about like, well, what if they attack me? Who's thinking about that? Like, when are UFOs attacking planes? Unless you've been reading like those books.
Yeah.
Those books I was reading when I was 9. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also,
anyway, sorry.
Also, if you're watching Encounters of the Third Kind as well, we'll get into it how that movie actually plays a part in this story a little bit. Okay, man. So the last thing I want to mention here is that he flown out at 6:15 p.m. and it was October 6:15 p.m. So it's getting dark. It's getting a little bit like darker, you know what I'm saying? And this is where the craziness actually happened. We actually have the transcript now. I'm not gonna read the transcript, but I think I could just leave it on the YouTube channel for like, and I might as well like put it in the description as well for everyone who wants to read it. So I'm just gonna mention like that Frederick actually radioed Melbourne air traffic control at 7:06 p.m. So he flown out at like 6:15 p.m. So around 50 minutes or so after he took off, he radioed the air traffic control with the question. He was asking if there were any known like aircraft in his vicinity. He also reported that an unidentified aircraft was following him at 4,500 feet, which is apparently 1,400 meters, like above him or something like that. He was told by the radio traffic control guys that there was no known traffic at that level. Frederick said that he could see a large unknown aircraft which appeared to be illuminated by 4 bright landing lights that were apparently green as well. That's an important detail as well. He was unable to confirm the aircraft type. He said that it had passed about 300 meters overhead and was moving at high speeds. So that's 1,000 feet overhead. But for our US audience, Valentich then reported that the aircraft was approaching him from the east and said that other pilot might be purposely toying with him. So he was thinking at that point, or allegedly he was thinking, that this aircraft, because he could be potentially lying here and making everything up, we will get into that. He said that this aircraft was toying with him, like playing games or something. Valentich also said that the aircraft was orbiting above him and that it had a shiny metal surface and a green light on it. Valentich reported that he was experiencing engine problems. He also was asked to identify the aircraft again, but that he radioed, "It's not an aircraft." His transmission was then interrupted by unidentified noise described as being metallic scraping sounds, and then all contact was lost. So the only thing is here is like, do you know like when would like a Cessna type plane make metallic scraping sounds? Is it like indications of a potential engine failure or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that can go wrong, and does. I mean, I guess that could be, like you said, like his engine seizing up, or something breaking, or even a part ripping off the plane, right? Like you can see in that. So by the way, this is like this one, and so this is a Cessna 182, and the 172 is the other model, and they're kind of like your beginner level plane, which isn't. It sounds like I'm speaking down to them. I'm not. Like, anybody that flies one of these has accomplished a lot in their lives, and you could have, a whole long life of flying a plane like this and do really awesome things. But it's also like the kind of plane you'll get taught to fly. It's pretty.
Yeah.
It's relatively simple to fly. It's got one engine. It's propellers. You're not dealing with as much stuff as like a multi-engine plane. You're not going that fast. Like, I think the top speed for these things is like 140 miles an hour.
What?
At
Seriously?
like full throttle. Yeah, no, it's not very fast at all. And I think a lot of times you're going like only 90. But you can fly. You're not stuck in traffic, right? So it's a pretty cool little aircraft. Like the landing gear in a lot of these, at least I think some of the models do have retractable. This one doesn't have retractable landing gear, so the wheels stick out there the whole time. And yeah, I mean, especially before COVID, I would see these things like above my house all day long.
Cool.
And I still do. They still tool around. Yeah, they're cool little aircraft. But yeah, I mean, I guess the question is like, yeah, what could be going on?
Yeah.
What could be happening? Yeah.
I mean,
this radio conversation.
Dude, how about you could handle the search and investigation parts right now, and then I will sort of quickly look through the unusual amount of UFO sightings on that day. So if you don't mind, just like you could probably take over the search and the investigation.
Yeah, so I mean, no surprise that radio conversation, which, like you said, there's sort of I think you gave an excellent summary. and gave the spirit of it and the key details. That's a pretty alarming conversation. All of a sudden, they can't get them on the radio anymore. They fear the worst. So, they did a very serious search. So they sent out a RAAF Lockheed P3 Orion. So P3 Orion is it's a big 4-engine propeller aircraft that they usually use. These days, the Navy uses them to hunt for subs. It's like a big patrol aircraft. They sent out 8 civilian aircraft, and the search went over 1,000 square miles, and they didn't find anything, and they ceased efforts on the 25th. Now, it's interesting because one of the other YouTubers I saw who covered this, she's like, she's not the only one to ask this, but a lot of people are like, well, how could they find no wreckage? And I have to tell you, this just happened recently. I just for fun, there's this one site I go to that shows for the whole world, but also my area, all the aircraft that different radars are tracking, and you can go to it. It's free. And it's been a lot of fun for me because I've sort of started writing down and logging different helicopters in my area. Now I know every single helicopter the LAPD uses, and they use a lot. Things like that, but you also see military flights and things like that. So case in point, this weekend I saw Coast Guard aircraft doing all sorts of searching off the coast of Santa Barbara. And I'm like, oh, what's that? And wouldn't you know, it was literally a plane like this that after takeoff. So So a plane like this, just same basic class, single engine plane, taking off the Santa Barbara Municipal Airport, which is right on the coast. And literally, people saw it go down. So they saw the person on radio, they were having trouble. They took off. They were in the air for half a minute, and guess what? They didn't find anything immediately. So they knew almost exactly when it went down, that it went down within a mile or two of the beach, right off this really highly populated area. I mean, the University of California at Santa Barbara is there. The airport's there. Some of the most expensive housing and real estate in California is there, and modern search aircraft, just like the kinds that looked for him. They couldn't find this aircraft. I don't know what the update is, if they were able to find anything, but once again, it's kind of they see an oil slick, maybe the ocean can just swallow things whole, and I think that's probably the source for a lot of mystery. Now, they did kind of do a longer term investigation, and they couldn't really figure out what happened. I mean, given all the back and forth, they said they found an engine cowl flap that washed ashore on Flinders Island, but once again, it's I think I heard on another YouTuber said that it didn't necessarily match, even though it was the same make and model. It didn't match necessarily the serial numbers of his aircraft.
I just want to add one more thing to this Flinders Island flap that was found washed up on the shore. So this is the Flinders Island, and allegedly Frederick lost contact somewhere around Cape Otway. So this area right here. So it's a pretty far place for an air flap 6 years or 5 years after the incident, because it happened I believe way I'm trying to read here 5 years. Yeah, I think it was 5 years after his disappearance. So it's a long time. And the other thing I will mention here is that there have been other airplanes that took off around Flinders Island that have reported losing this air flap mid-air, mid-flight. So so that's probably definitely not from Frederick's airplane. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I mean, just the devil's advocate. I mean, it could be because I know when we covered the Malaysian Air incident, stuff from that airplane was washing up way far away. The ocean currents. I mean, that's the whole message in a bottle thing, right? Is you can put a message in a bottle in, I don't know, Hawaii, and it'll wash up in California. The currents are just wacky. They'll push things around. But yeah, I mean, to your point, this engine cowl flap is something that's used to help control the temperature of the engine. Okay. So that's, when you actually start studying like airplanes and flying, and especially those propeller airplanes, man, it gets super complicated. Like it's not as easy as your car. Like in your car, you don't usually think about like the temperature of anything too much, other than like maybe if you're running low on oil or something. But like airplanes that just have a billion different parts and things going on, and things you have to worry about, where like, you know, it's way colder high up in the air than it is when you took off, so you have to think about that. Aircraft have to do a lot, so yeah, I mean that's part of it now. But yet to your point, just like Flight 19, where they thought that they found them underwater, and then, you know, that was the missing Navy flight out of Florida.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh well, guess what, like 100 other airplanes crashed during training accidents over the years, so there's a lot of dead airplanes underwater, and these aren't the ones. So I guess what anyone listening to this right now is like, wow, these guys are kind of skeptical of what happened here. And maybe this is where we tell the other side is,
Yeah, I mean,
hey, you know, like even though this guy, you know, does seem like he was really interested in the topic and obsessed with it, and then that thing with his mom, I have a hard time getting over that.
That's a crazy fact, yeah.
Yeah, but then to your point, and you have this in the research, is that, well, maybe the reason why he was so obsessed with the topic, though, was because it seemed like a lot was going on regarding unidentified flying objects in his area when this happened.
Yeah, so I guess I'll take over a little bit here. So, apparently, an unusually large amount of UFO sightings have been reported on the same day that Frederick had went missing in the general area. So, it was allegedly between 12 to 50 UFO sightings. I don't think why the discrepancy is so large between 12 and 50, but I don't really know. Maybe like some sightings were really out there, but I think some were really credible. And I will say that most of them actually happened around Cape Otway. So I think I have a picture of Cape Otway somewhere around here. So Cape Otway is like a really cool place. I mean, Australia is filled with cool places, I guess. And apparently people have witnessed an aircraft being towed by an alien aircraft, like a Cessna being towed by an alien aircraft. Now, I'm not really certain how credible that particular sighting was. A lot of people reported like flashes in the sky, circular, sphere type shape objects in the sky, and it definitely was an unusual amount of sightings for that day. I will say that it could be the reason for this could be that it was a really good time for a lot of people who were UFO enthusiasts to just come out with their crazy UFO sightings, because it was super convenient, you know, to go and do that when someone goes missing like that. But I guess I would just probably write off these UFO sightings like yeah, just probably like a bunch of people coming out to talk about UFOs, because now, you know, they're a little bit more credible when they do, rather than, you know, your other day when nothing interesting happening. There was a man called Roy Manifold. He was a plumber, and he actually was sort of having a small little vacation in Crayfish Bay. So this area right here, so literally at the same point where Frederick was supposed to fly over, and he took some pictures, and he took those pictures right around the time when Frederick actually went missing. And one of the pictures, because he took like 6 of them, one of the pictures was, well, I'll just leave it here, man. You have any ideas what that is? Because on this picture we could see, like on the top right corner-ish area, we see like a black little like smoke or something like that, and you probably can't see that, but in post-production I will definitely have the image a lot larger. Above, like below the smoke, there's like a circular shape, and I will say that experts looked into this picture and they see that it was not tampered with. And I will also say that this guy was a plumber. He was not he apparently had no UFO like interests or whatever. He was just taking like some cool pictures of a beautiful crayfish bay, and one of those pictures came out like this. So you wanna add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell what's going on there. I mean, if I were to look at it from just a photography point of view, and this is from the film days, right? So this is before digital cameras. I mean, something super exposed that. So, or sorry, I mean, actually, it's the opposite, right? Because this was from the negative. Yeah, I mean, it really makes you wonder, like, what's blotting out the light there? Like, is that a flaw in the film, or is that like once we see it all blown up, and when our listeners and our viewers, like when they come check out the YouTube of this,
Yeah,
it'll be really interesting to see the feedback of what our audience thinks it is, because it's a weird shape.
it's a weird shape. It's a weird shape, and it could have been there. Like, photograph experts said that it was not like it's not been tampered with. I don't know if they can like say for certain if it was a camera glitch or not. They probably can't do that, but if it was not a glitch, then what the hell is that? I will jump into some other interesting details that the investigators found. I think right around that point we will jump to the theories, because we have quite a bit of theories, so I still want to save some time for the theories. So investigators actually found some more interesting information about Frederick's like backstory. So investigators found out that there were no passengers to be picked up at Kings Island, and that's what Frederick told the airport officials. Let's remember that fact. However, to his family and girlfriend, he had said that he was flying to pick up some crayfish. So immediately I'm thinking, why can't he tell the same story to both sets of like parties, to like both sets of people? Like, why does he have to lie to the airport guys about this thing, and then he tells the family another thing? We will jump into all of this soon. He told his girlfriend, now this is really crazy, he told his girlfriend that he'd be back at 7:30 p.m. He started the flight at 6:15 p.m. That's physically impossible, flying a 90 miles per hour Cessna from like Melbourne to Kings Island, picking up people. Like, okay, he told her that he was gonna go pick up crayfish, which probably is even a longer, it would probably take him longer than picking up people. Like crayfish, you'd probably have to go to the market or something like that, and be back by 7:30 p.m. So he was apparently going to do all of this in 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now that's clearly impossible. That's at least a 3 to 4 hour like trip. You know what I'm saying? He didn't inform Kings Island Airport about his intent to land there, which is, I think, this is potentially the biggest red flag in the story, because Kings Island Airport landing strip was uncontrolled back in the 70s, in 78 especially, and that would mean that there could potentially be no lights turned on, and it would definitely be dark at 8 p.m. ish in October. So he like, if some other pilots were to land there, maybe the lights would have been left turned on, but like, he didn't inform anyone, and the landing strip was uncontrolled, so potentially there were no lights there for him. So I don't know what that's all about. That's like probably the craziest thing of it all, that he did not inform the Kings Island Airport landing strip, and I feel like that pretty much tells us that he wasn't even going to try to land in Kings Island. Like, we have to say that for a fact, that he wasn't even planning on landing in Kings Island, because even though he failed a whole bunch of tests, I think you have you still have enough sense to like call the airport that you're gonna land at, to like say, yo guys, I'm gonna land somewhere around 8 p.m. Like, could you guys like leave the lights on for me or something like that, so that I don't die? So yeah, I think that he probably would have done that. And now we can jump into the theories, man. So, given all of this information, we will react to all of this information right now. And I just want to go through the theories since we still have time in the show, right about like exactly the amount of time that I wanted to leave here for the theories, like 20 minutes, something like that, 15 minutes. Let's start off with Valentich becoming disoriented and flying upside down. I know that JFK Jr. had died in a similar fashion. You want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so that was a good case in point of two things. One, the importance of actually being certified and trained how to use your instruments to fly in low or no visibility conditions, and B, what can happen when a pilot pushes that. So, JFK Jr., we're talking about the son of the JFK, so John F. Kennedy's namesake son, the same son who was a little baby, little toddler playing underneath his desk in a famous photo when JFK was president. JFK Jr. had grown up to be like quite an impressive person. He's very famous. He's good looking. He has a good job. He's like a well-known, I think he was an editor at that point of a famous magazine. He had a celebrity girlfriend, Daryl Hannah, who was like a very attractive actress from mostly the 80s, but after the 80s. And yeah, case in point, he was supposed to take a flight. I think it was to Martha's Vineyard. I'm trying to remember, but it was the same. It was almost eerily similar to this, where he, I think he kind of misjudged maybe the visibility, and had gone in the evening, had sort of either intentionally or unintentionally got into conditions that were probably beyond what he really knew how to cope with. And what happened was there's this unfortunate but kind of well-known phenomenon. We've even talked about this, I think, in our Kobe Bryant episode, which is definitely worth a listen because we get really technical about some of these issues.
Yeah.
So please do look up that episode if you like what we're talking about here today. So what happens is you get kind of a kind of vertigo where you think that you're steering the plane straight, but in reality you're not. So in reality, you have somehow turned the airplane because what you perceived as a horizon wasn't real. And even though there's an instrument right in front of you in the aircraft that tells you which way you're pointed. But if you haven't been trained to it and you're not doing that as sort of your normal functioning, and let's face it, like I said, there's a lot going on. And then I feel like I know when I fly, I like to look out the window. So I feel like people that like to fly, especially beginners, they probably sometimes get a little dazzled by what's going on outside them. But even when you can't see much. So what happened was they think JFK Jr. eventually ended up upside down. And what's crazy is you don't even feel it. I think because the force of the airplane, just sort of your senses are a little bit off kilter anyway from the flying part of things, because you're moving at a high rate of speed. You're going up, you're going down, you're doing different things. And then so what happened is they think he essentially did this kind of like weird dive into the water and probably didn't even really realize what was happening until maybe it was too late. And he just, without warning, just right into the water. So
that's crazy.
So here's something. So one of the theories was, and we'll get into, I think, in the breakdown.
I don't know if you wanted to finish up on this theory. I personally would have to say that I don't believe that Valentich was upside down, because allegedly the Cessna fuel tank was supposed to like completely shut off if it went upside down. So he could not have called the air control if that was the case, because he would have realized immediately that he was flying upside down. So that's just one of the theories. I think it's pretty easy to like sort of discredit.
The one thing I do wonder, and to that point, is when we were talking about that, this was the case even for a lot of propeller aircraft, like the famous Spitfire fighter. Same thing. You turn it upside down, the engine stops working. I do wonder though, if you're upside down and you have some velocity. So like I can understand if you're upside down and you're not
Okay.
like, you know what I mean? So gravity, right? If you take a cup of water and you turn it upside down and at the same time move the cup really fast towards the ground, you know how like the water stays in the cup until you stop moving the cup. Does that make sense?
Makes it,
So
yeah.
if I took the cup and I made a really fast upside down U, like the water will stay in the bottom of the cup until I stop and then it on the ground. I wonder if you could have enough velocity to just have enough, and maybe that's why his engine was like idling rough, where it started like doing weirdness because it
Okay.
was starting to get to the point. Yeah, so that's just a devil's advocate. But yeah. I mean, other than that, like, yeah, if he was inverted for any amount of time, you would think that he would know, like, unless of course he was distracted by something else. Okay, so that's one theory.
Yeah, I mean, we could jump to the second one. We have that he was deceived by the illusion of a tilted horizon, for which he attempted to compensate and inadvertently put his aircraft into a downward so-called uh, graveyard spiral, which he initially mistook for simple orbiting of the aircraft. This was a super complicated theory, and I don't know, man, you want to add to that because
Yeah.
it's super complicated.
So and then maybe I'm kind of moving some of my reactions up front, but I think this is a good time to address it. So on one hand, I get super frustrated by the skeptics who are like, well, you were just seeing Venus, or like whenever these pilots, especially if they're experienced pilots, and even I would say even Frederick is an experienced pilot. I mean, 150 hours flying an airplane is still a lot of time, even though he didn't seem like he was very good at it. Um,
Yeah.
Whenever someone's like, oh, someone saw, I mean, here's the one thing. On one hand, like, yeah, for sure, stars, sorry, our planets, like, even right now, like, if I go out into the sky, like, I've been noticing them over the years as I got a little better at stargazing. Like, I'll actually notice when, like, Venus and Jupiter and Saturn um, are a lot more visible. And, like, yeah, sometimes, like, Venus, like, it looks like, I know me and my kids stood and stared at Venus for, like, 5 minutes thinking it was an airliner coming in, until we were like, oh, I think that's Venus. And then sometimes it's the opposite, where you think it's Venus and it's the airliner. So, like, that's one of the things that is always the go-to is skeptics. Skeptics are always like, oh, they saw Venus. And in this case, what it was is there were actually four of the planets that were all kind of in the same plane. And they sort of formed, they said at that time of the year in Australia, it forms a sort of a diamond in the sky. So their theory was that, hey, he was looking at these four lights. He was obsessed with the topic. So there were four bright lights. His mind filled in a lot of the green metallic, this and that, and the size of the aircraft. And then, okay, so then when you say that, my go-to would be like, okay, but how does it pass over his head and go fly past him and all that? Because that, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't,
Yeah, I get it.
a star stays in the same part of the sky. Yeah. I mean, you can fly towards Venus all day long.
Yeah.
It's not going to move other than like when the Earth moves. Okay, but then in a way, it does kind of go with this death spiral theory, where maybe that's why. Because he said, here's the thing: he said it kept orbiting over his head,
Mhm.
like flying past him, and then orbiting over him. And I'm like, like it does kind of work if you're going in a spiral. Then it would, then like a star that was right over you, or like in a certain part of your
Oh,
field of
yeah,
view.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean? It would kind of look like. So the devil's advocate,
yeah.
the part I talked to in the beginning that doesn't want to get fooled
Hmm.
and wants to make sure we always have the best evidence
Yeah,
for any kind of UFO sighting or case. You know what I mean? Like that, I'm like, okay, that kind of sounds plausible. I still like, it's still kind of on the edge of like,
yeah.
how much is this guy's imagination feeding in? Yeah, but okay, so that could kind of
I
work.
mean,
But
yeah,
yeah,
I will say that that definitely works. And I just want to jump to the next theory. And I think we will have like, we'll still like return to this a little bit, but like, I think I get it, what you said. I definitely get it. Like, if you're spiraling, maybe those planets that you can see, I didn't even realize that as a pilot you could see planets and things like that, but like apparently you can. So if you're spiraling, maybe it does seem that it's like those planets are actually moving, so that would sort of make him think that he's seeing airships. I will say that thing, that he did seem fairly calm, at least from all of the like redos of like the official audio transcript, like all of the fan-made things. He does seem like he was fairly calm. So I'm thinking for a situation like that, he would be panicking a little bit more than that. So whatever, we'll get into the next theory right now, which is that extraterrestrials either destroyed Frederick's aircraft or abducted him. So for that, I will just say I just have a little bit of information regarding that. So some individuals reported seeing an erratically moving green light in the sky, so right around the same area where Roy Manifold took his creepy picture, and that the aircraft was in a steep dive at the time. UFologists, like UFO enthusiasts, believed these accounts are significant because of the green light mentioned in Valentich radio transmission. So I guess we would be just going back to the fact that there were a lot of reports of like UFOs, and things like that. Melbourne police actually received reports of a light aircraft making a mysterious landing not far from Cape Otway at the same time of Valentich disappearance. That's the only thing I want to mention here. I mean, we can't really disprove or prove these alien theories right now, so I guess I'll just leave those for the finale. Another thing, we already talked about like Roy Manifold's picture. That was a pretty creepy picture. Maybe it was UFOs, maybe it was not. Let's jump to this one, and I think you will want to add to it a little bit. He committed suicide to credit the UFO explanation, or just in general, just to commit suicide. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the evidence potentially pointing to that would be, him lying about his destination, him having there's some real issues with like where he was going and how much fuel he had, and here's the other thing is, when we say he committed suicide, and everyone thinks like, oh, he planned to end it all. If you do something intentionally that ends up accidentally killing you, that could also be ruled as suicide. So if you did something that like maybe you weren't supposed to do, and then it ended up like, I think the example was that that thing where that person put themselves into a water tank all tied up in a scuba suit, and then they couldn't get. I know it's such a bizarre thing, but like, I mean, it's like my nightmare. But I think in a way that's suicide. Like if you cause your own death, and it was something that like wasn't really accidental, or you know what I mean, it was intentional acts.
Dude, I just want to say that literally what you just mentioned, like the last two theories I have, would sort of be like accidental death as well. If you can see those right in the shared file we have, I have that Frederick intentionally disappeared and then maybe accidentally died in the process to credit the UFO explanation. So what this theory means that he may disappeared successfully, or that he unsuccessfully attempted to disappear. So I don't know, you want to add to that, because I think that's also like suicide at that point, but I just left it out as a different theory in the shared file.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was we can probably converge those two, because either way, you could I think whether you want to be charitable and say, hey, this guy had everything going for him. Even, despite all this kind of issues, he's still like a very young man, with a lot of promise and enthusiasm and the right mental attitude, at least, if not the right, the right, implementation of things. Certainly a lot of successful people make a lot of mistakes, and especially early on in your life as you try to figure things out. It's just, unfortunately, aviation is one of those areas where you can't afford to make a lot of mistakes. Nope. But yeah, I mean, the part of me really makes me wonder, when he was doing all that research into like the official files and like encounters, whether he was really coaching himself so that if he
Dude,
were to do a
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I mean, I don't know if.
like a prank or
Oh
something.
yeah, so you have been reading. I was thinking, are you reading the last point or not? So okay, I'll just read it out there, and I guess you could like add to that as well. So the last theory I have here that Frederick Valentich was actually playing a prank on everyone, and then maybe accidentally died in the process. Now, why I think that is because there was a Spielberg movie that you actually coincidentally mentioned in the beginning of the show called The Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was supposed to be like an alien movie or something like that. I think I've seen it, but I don't think I remember what the premise was all about. However, in that movie,
It's the best.
yeah,
Yeah.
but in that movie, there is a scene where a pilot contacts air traffic control and literally does the same exact lines, almost like the same exact lines that Frederick did. And the craziest part is that this movie came out in 1977 and Frederick disappeared in 1978. What are the chances that a UFO enthusiast whose mother was kidnapped by aliens saw that movie?
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. Now here's the thing. Now, here's where I'm gonna switch gears and be super fair to Frederick. I mean to kind of say like, hey, there the reason why those lines were in that movie. So the scene you're talking about is in the very beginning of the movie, where what happens is there's like an airliner that is talking to air traffic control, and like some weird UFO starts coming at them in their commercial airplane, their commercial airliner, and like it goes whoosh, and it's like it actually shows up on radar where they get freaked out because like it looks like it's going to crash into them, and it doesn't. And then at the end of that whole thing, the air traffic control, like the federal authorities are like, hey, do you want to make a report? And all the other airliners around, like both that plane and the other planes that saw it are like, nah, we don't really want to do that. That's going to be embarrassing, and it's not going to help our careers or anything. And the fact was, here's the thing that's on Frederick's side. This has really been happening a lot. So there's a couple different books I read, both when I was a kid, but also even more recently. There is a long history of strange stuff going on in the sky. That the Nimitz UFO thing was just kind of the cherry on top, where we had it on video. We had like a super credible witness and witnesses, I should say, plus the Navy backing up their own pilot. But there have actually been like here's the one thing for when Frederick talked about like, oh well, what if the airplane attacks me or the UFO attacks me? So there had actually been a couple famous incidents, including a fatal one in the United States, of military aircraft chasing UFOs and not being able to catch them, having their engines turn off. There was a famous one back in Iran before before their revolution, when we used to give them military equipment and military advisory services. So there was one where some Iranian pilots.
Crazy times. I just want to mention crazy times.
Because we used to, I mean, Iran used to be our best friend in the area besides Israel. So we used to give them our best equipment. I mean, they still have F-14s from us. So there's this one incident where they were chasing a UFO that they had on radar, that they were chasing with F-4 Phantoms, which were a pretty good aircraft at the time. They had I think one of our either a colonel or general who was there like on the scene on the radio advising them, and they couldn't catch this freaking UFO. They were chasing it all over the place. And of course, once again, you get all these kind of skeptics, and it's good to be skeptical for sure, but the skeptics saying, oh, they were chasing Venus, oh, the radar was having problems and doing things that radar. Yeah, it's true, radars do mess up, but per our Nimitz episode and some of the other episodes we talked about, there's also special filters that they put on the radars, because the radars used to pick up things that they thought weren't real, and now you really start to wonder whether the radars were in fact picking up things like this, and that's why they just didn't think they were real, because they didn't believe in flying saucers.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so this is a way of saying that, like, what he was saying, I mean, to your point, like, it was a famous movie, super famous, like Close Encounters, highly recommend it. By the way, that whole like captured pilot thing is actually part of like there's actually like a bunch of I don't want to, even though it's an ancient movie that's almost as old as I am, I don't want to give a spoiler for the end. But like the whole idea that they may have like kidnapped pilots and other people comes up in the movie, and they actually do a good job in the movie of taking real life people and making reference to them. So I'll leave it there, so I won't spoil the movie. But yeah, I think this is why it was really in the air, and like I said, 1978. So
Yeah.
he could have been a big Spielberg fan. There was a lot of books that had come out in the 60s and 70s, and I think not without good reason. So that's the part where like I am on his side a little bit. That I think it's really frustrating is if everybody was totally truthful about this, we wouldn't have to worry about whether Frederick was being truthful if the government had also always been truthful. But the fact is, the governments of the world, not just ours in the U.S., but in other countries, have always felt a little bit threatened by the topic for different reasons. Sometimes because they're worried about people getting panicked. Sometimes because they're worried about like, well, if this is real, is it a genuine defense threat? And then how do we look if we don't have a good counter for that? So maybe we just like make the topic go away, and then we don't have to answer that question. And it's a known fact that at one point the CIA had actually initiated a campaign with our domestic broadcasters here and our different media outlets to intentionally downplay the UFO phenomena, which was getting a lot of attention in the 40s and 50s post-war. And they intentionally told the media to turn it into a topic of ridicule. So just think of that. If you believed in something and then the media kept making fun of it,
Yeah.
at some point you feel kind of stupid, right, talking about it. So that actually happened in this country. So
Okay.
in a way, Frederick, Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie aside, he's kind of like going against public opinion in a way. Like he's kind of believing, he's like believing in the Great Pumpkin or something, from like the Charlie Brown cartoon. Like it's a little bit wacky, and that cuts both ways. On one hand, it could show he's a very, very open-minded person, open-minded person with strong scientific, interests, certainly like flying. But on the other hand, he could also be like a weirdo. So
Yeah, that's a funny way to put it, actually. Okay, man. So I think at this point we should be like wrapping it up. So before we do, I think let's just give our theories, because this is a mystery. We don't know what happened there. So I guess I will sort of say that I don't think that he encountered aliens, just because of the fact, like, what makes me believe that he didn't encounter actual aliens was his flip-floppy preparation and the things that he told everyone before the flight. Like, he said to the airport officials he's going there to pick up people that were not waiting for him on King's Island, that they were not there. He told his parents and his girlfriend that he was going there to pick up crayfish, it was not even crayfish season. There was no crayfish there. And he told his girlfriend that he would make the trip and come back, like, to meet her or something like that within like an hour and 15 minutes, when that's clearly like at least 4 hours, I think. And even 4 hours, that like pretty quick to finish that trip, I think, or maybe just about. And he did the mother that like got kidnapped by like an aliens. Father believed in aliens. He saw aliens. I think there's a lot of aliens in his life prior to his disappearance, and just the way he died, I feel like I get a strong sense that it was all scripted, planned. And I will say I believe that he did not have the intentions of killing himself. I definitely don't think he had the intentions of killing himself. From the interview that I've looked of his girlfriend, she pretty much made him seem like a really cool guy. Like he seemed like a really like a chill dude, to some degree. Like from that interview, like he had no bad intentions of like doing anything bad to anyone else. So I don't think he wanted to die. I don't think he wanted to disappear. I think he wanted to, he wanted to become like famous for surviving a UFO encounter, because I think that sort of topic was consuming him for the last year, like really heavily, and he probably saw that his commercial pilot career is not gonna pan out, given the fact how many times he failed to like successfully pass those exams and things like that. I think because of that fact, he was probably thinking, if I can't be a commercial pilot, at least I will be known for something in aviation. I will become famous for something. So I think that was his sort of a plan. I think he accidentally died because like the conditions were perfect for him to die. It was night and he was flying over water, which is something he never done before. So I think that's what happened. At the end of the day, he wanted to become famous or play a prank. You could pretty much put those two theories in the same area, and things just didn't work out for him. He accidentally died in the process. Why the remains and like the plane wasn't found? Because it's pretty hard to find like a plane in the goddamn ocean. So I'll just leave it at that. And I mean, you want to add to that, and then we'll, I guess, wrap up.
I mean, I think you gave the perfect summary. I mean, you hit every single mark that, between the red flags about his destination and his motives and his high level excitement, I almost give it like, it's almost like if you were to tell your teacher the day before, like, oh gosh, I sure hope the dog doesn't eat my homework and then bite me on my leg so I can't go to school. And then like, the next day, that's the excuse that's given, but you don't even have a dog.
Exactly.
I mean, that's unfortunate. I think that's the difference between this guy and like Commander Fravor with the Nimitz incident. It's very interesting because it's like in theory, it's almost the same kind of thing going on in an aviation encounter with unknown or unexplained aerial phenomena or vehicles. But just one person has a lot more credibility, and they have, in theory, some pretty good proof in form of the video and the other witnesses. And this guy, unfortunately, as much as I think probably even when I was a little kid, he was probably being used as one of those big examples of like, well, UFOs took him. And now I think that's the big difference to my original premise is back then, the only people who were really talking about these things for the most part were like other fans. And then the conversation was very abridged because unless you were like, like an older person going to like a UFO convention or something, in which case you're talking to other believers, there wasn't this ongoing like cycle of conversation. There was no way to do it. There's no internet yet. And I think that's the great thing about right now with the internet and with YouTube and social media is that we're having these conversations, case in point, you and me, and our audience, and we're having them a lot faster, and we're able to trade ideas. And I think that we're very quickly able to not only find the good examples, like the Nimitz UFO incident, which is almost like the gold standard. I mean, aside from like short of a UFO landing on the White House lawn, that's almost as good as it gets. And then cases like these that I think formerly used to be kind of put in that category just because of the different evidence and the radio stuff and things like that. But now as we all kind of get to put our heads together and scrutinize it, we get to come to a better consensus. So that's what I really love about this show, our show, other people's shows, and the ongoing conversation is that I think we get a lot closer to the truth the more we really examine these things and talk them over.
Yeah, I mean, guys, this has been episode number 66. If you enjoyed the show, just leave a like, leave a subscribe to the channel, and whatever, like subscribe to our podcast directories like Google Apps, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to those podcasts. We're everywhere, literally. And I mean, yeah, just I guess stay safe and catch us on the next week's episode. Peace out, guys.